Pro Series Podcast. This is episode 143, and today's guest is Håvard Melå. He is a author, a professional coach, and he is shooting from Madrid, Spain, but he's from Norway. We talk about the addiction of cell phones, social media, all of that, and screen time. It's a really cool episode. He also talks a little bit about an addiction he had and how he got over it, how he's helping other people with addiction out there. And if you love social media and you feel like you have that love-hate relationship and you just can't get your face out of the phone, this is a great episode for you to listen to and maybe even check out his book. But before we get into this episode, please like, subscribe, and review the Pro Series Podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts. Now I hope you enjoy episode 143 with Håvard Melå. Howard, thank you so much for hopping on the Pro Series Podcast. Excited to talk to you from where you're recording. I saw your bio from James and thought you would be a perfect person for the Pro Series and the listenership. So thank you for coming on this podcast on the weekend.
No, thank you. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, and we talked before, but where are you shooting from?
I'm actually based in Madrid right now in Spain. I'm originally from Norway, but I moved down here last year.
Okay. I just had do you know Dr. Torkel at all?
No.
No, I had him on the podcast. He's from Norway a couple weeks ago. He also did a book and all this stuff. And he kind of came through the same group that you were pitched to. So I didn't know if you guys knew each other or not.
Oh yeah, that's cool. I actually you just said the name in a bit different way because I saw there was a Norwegian guy featured on your podcast like Dr. Torkil Farja.
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
Yeah. But I don't know him personally.
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool. Well, I want to get into it and how you got started in the business. I want to talk about coaching. I want to talk about what you do as your passion project. But let's start from the very beginning on maybe when you graduated school and then kind of got this itch for what you're doing as your passion project now.
Yeah, for sure. So back when I graduated from high school in 2013, I was not really sure what I wanted to do with my life. So I went to the military for 1 year. In Norway, it's kind of it's not mandatory, but a lot of people go. I did that for 1 year. After, I was kind of lost, to be honest. I had like odd jobs. I was unemployed for periods. I started studying, but I dropped out. And a lot of it was down to like issues I had. Like, for example, I was addicted to porn, and that was holding me back a lot. I had no control over my digital habits. I was kind of lost in life, to be honest. But eventually I managed to turn things around. I got a degree in electrical engineering. I worked in that space for a few years. I also started my online business. But what I really like to do is writing and kind of sharing how I kind of managed to overcome the issues I had. So that's kind of what I do in my spare time. I'm very passionate about helping people that was in a similar position as me, and that's why I also write and do a bit of coaching.
Yeah. Did you ever expect, 10 years ago that you'd be a writer? Is that something you always liked? No?
Not at all. Not at all. I just liked reading books in my when I was a kid, and that's it. But I never expected that to happen, to be honest.
Absolutely. So when did you got on the right track? When did you really get that bug that you want to help other people that were maybe in the same shoes as you were just lost?
Yeah, to be honest, it was mostly because back when I was addicted to porn, it was holding me back a lot in many different ways. I had massive social anxiety. It was not only due to porn, of course, but that was a big part of it. I had no aspirations in life. I was kind of lost. I knew that porn was kind of holding me back a lot. So when I managed to overcome it and I started seeing like, okay, I suddenly have a lot more motivation. It's way easier to connect with people. I suddenly felt motivated to do something with my life. I started studying all that. And basically, like when I had been away from it, I don't know, 1.5 years, my life was just so much better that I kind of felt like it was my responsibility in a way to kind of share, because I felt like I had some insights that could really help people, and that is why I decided to write my first book, which is about overcoming this addiction. So I wouldn't say I'm not a writer that writes just because I like it. It's more like I just feel like I have something to share, and I write
Mhm.
about that stuff. I don't write about random stuff. I know
Yeah,
nothing.
absolutely. So when you wrote this book and are you meeting these people out in the real world and have been changed by your book? Has that happened yet, or is it too new?
It's mostly like, yeah, I haven't met people in person that come up to me and stuff. That would be nice, of course, but several people have messaged me and said like this book has actually made a big difference in my life, which
Mm.
has been very fulfilling to experience, because that was also the reason why I wrote it. I really wanted to help people struggling with the issues I had, so that was very cool.
Yeah, I think all these little passion projects, you kind of all my guests are passion projects. They start them out selfishly to help themselves, but in the end, it really helps other people that you probably go into it thinking that you're going to help people, but you don't actually know how much it's impacting people because not every single person is going to come up to you. They might have social anxiety and not be able to tell you that how much it helped you. So did you expect anybody to actually read it, or did you kind of just put it out selfishly because you wanted that healing for yourself?
Yeah, it was several reasons behind it. I started writing the book in, I think it was December 2019. I just got this thought in my head, like, okay, I think I have some insights that can help people struggling with the porn addiction. And part of it was also selfish, that I wanted to make some money. I thought maybe I could make some money doing this. But to be honest, it was, I would say it was pretty naive, because I had no experience writing, I had no experience with book publishing, anything like that. I just decided to go for it. I spent 5 months writing it. It went way better than I had expected, like both in terms of I made some money doing it, but also what was really surprising to me was that some people actually got a lot out from reading it. So that
Mhm.
felt really good. That's why I decided to continue writing.
How do you actually go about writing a book? I mean, did you just so you just took a notebook or did you start typing away and then kind of send it out to publishers to see who wanted to publish it?
The first book was self-published, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, to be honest, it just started with an idea, and I had listened to a lot of podcasts about personal development, starting a business, and all that, and all of them like basically said like, if you have an idea, you have to just go for it, and maybe it will change along the way, but you have to start taking action. So I just decided, let's see what happens. So I just started writing. I edited it. I got somebody to make a cover, all that stuff. I'm sure it was not like the best way or the way people normally do it, but I just did it, and I'm really glad I did it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. I was curious. I had many authors on here, but I've never actually asked that question. And how do you actually go about getting the book out and selling it off to a publisher? So,
Yeah. So the first book, about porn addiction is called How to Thrive in the 21st Century. That one
okay.
was self-published, but I published another book in February this year called Digital Discipline, which is more about being conscious about social media use, the time we spend online, all that stuff. And that book was actually published through a publisher. So I learned some things from the first book that I kind of used to get published the second time.
Okay. Well, let's get into that second book. I think that's an interesting thing because a lot of people, I mean, nowadays phones tell you how much time you spend on each app, and it is very scary sometimes to see that. What's your advice on that? And like, how is it hurting us as a human being able to be on these social media apps all the time?
Yeah. So I read that the average person spends 4 hours and 30 minutes online every day, on
Dang.
their phone, like scrolling their phone or doing whatever. I'm
Yeah.
sure like part of that time is spent in a useful way, like messaging friends, maybe reading about something interesting. But most of the time, I think is spent like on TikTok, social media,
Mm,
just
get
consuming
lost.
content.
Oh yeah, you get
Yeah,
lost in there.
Yeah, it affects us in many ways. Like one of them is, of course, it affects our mind in the way that we get used to being distracted and not being intentional about what we're doing. In addition, it affects our dopamine a lot. And dopamine is basically the neurotransmitter that is responsible for our drive, energy, and motivation in life. And every time we get like a like on an Instagram post, or we see like a hot bikini photo or whatever it is, our dopamine spikes, and then it drops again afterwards.
Mm.
If we do this, like if we have this spike hundreds of times a day, we don't get the same motivation to go out there and make something of ourselves, or like go out and go for a run or whatever it is. It's like those small dopamine spikes, they really affect our drive and energy in other parts of life. And I'm sure
Mm.
like most people can relate to that, like after 2 hours on TikTok or whatever it is, you really feel a bit sluggish and like unmotivated.
Oh, definitely. I saw something. I actually talked about it in one of my podcasts a couple weeks ago about how this younger generation, if they post something and it doesn't get to a certain amount of likes, they delete it, and just because it's not to their standards or whatever it is. But I just think that's crazy mentally that you have to have that satisfaction. You have all those likes and those views and stuff to feel like that post is worthy, or you're worthy enough for that.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, and that's a different way it affects us, is like it can really affect self-esteem and all those kind of things. Is like the
Yeah.
more likes you get, the better you feel about yourself. And if you don't get likes, your self-esteem drops. And it's like a big minefield that affects, I think, especially the younger generation's mental health.
Hmm.
So that's also very problematic in a different way.
Yeah, it's hard because I mean, probably me and you are around the same age, and I didn't really have social media until like the end of my high school career, or halfway through my high school career. So I didn't grow up with it, and so I knew life before that. I don't. These newer generations don't know life before that, and that's a normal to them to have the social media and be hidden behind a screen, which is the hard part.
Yeah, yeah. And I think like another crazy thing is, I think some people kind of think more about their social media presence, like the persona they portrays online.
Hmm.
For some people, is more important than the person they are in real life,
Oh,
almost.
that's a good way to
At
think
least,
about it. Yeah.
yeah, at least for like pretty young people, I think that's the case with quite a few people, and that's pretty scary to think about.
Yeah, it's like we're living in the AI world already. Like you're living in a video game.
Yeah, kind of. And a different thing I think about sometimes is like, it's around 15 years ago that smartphones became common to have, and people started downloading Facebook and all these things. So in 15 years, we went from like spending zero time on social media to several hours a day.
Hmm.
So what will happen in another 15 years, unless we're conscious about how we spend our time? I think like the way to combat this is we have to be like, as an individual, we have to be really conscious about our relationship to social media, how we use our phone and all that stuff, because it's only going to get more and more addictive in the future.
Oh yeah. And I think there's so many people out there that don't think they're addicted. But like even me, if I'm scrolling on social media, sometimes I'm looking at it, I'm like, why am I looking at this? I just looked at it like 5 minutes ago and it's the same exact post. But for some reason, subconsciously, I'm just picking up my phone and opening up the apps. And it's something that subconsciously we don't really know that we're doing. It's just kind of a habit. And
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think it's like all these apps are made to be as addictive as possible,
hmm.
and to kind of short circuit our conscious mind. And just it's basically like a giant party for the reptilian part of our brain. And that reptilian part of the brain easily like gets sidetracked online and just ends up doubling down on this distracting and stimulating content. So
Yeah.
I think the way to combat it is, for one thing, we need to be disciplined. I think discipline is kind of the key to like, okay, putting away the phone, going to the gym or whatever it is. But also I think it's very important to be clear about what we want to do in
Mm.
our life and in our daily lives. Because if somebody comes home from work and they have no plans for the evening, it's very easy to just spend 5 hours on YouTube or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that, I mean, it's kind of like we forgot about what else you could do in life. Like that's kind of what your go-to is if you have downtime.
Yeah, yeah,
That or streaming something.
yeah. And I think that's really unfortunate because I think, at least in my experience, it's around 5 years ago that I started to be very conscious about this stuff because I started to feel how much it was holding me back to spend
Hmm.
a lot of time on social media. So I basically every night at 10 p.m. I just turned off the internet.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, so and then I had to start filling the time with something. Um, at first I was like, what the fuck am I gonna do now?
Yeah.
And then I started reading books. So I started learning more. And also I got used to doing activities that was less stimulating.
Yeah.
What the interesting thing that happened was that when I got used to like, let's call it like the more subtle pace of real life, I suddenly started feeling like spending more time with people. I got more motivation and drive in life, like in general.
Hmm.
And all of it came from just like reducing my screen time, which is pretty crazy because I think most of the screen time we have is like it's constantly affecting our dopamine. And
Yeah.
that's the issue, I think.
I think I just read this, or maybe I heard it on the radio station that I listened to. As soon as someone wakes up in the morning, majority of the people just grab their phone. Even before they get out of bed, it's like the first thing they open their eyes, they have to check all apps and figure out notifications and what's new and how much that affects your brain and your sight, everything to do that first thing in the morning. You're not even getting your body time for your body to warm up.
Yeah, I think that's not good. And I try to like at least I try to have like 1 hour where I don't check the phone after I
Yeah.
wake up. I feel like that's very, very helpful to get more centered and yeah. I think like checking the phone as soon as you wake up is like one of the worst things to do, but it's so common.
Absolutely. So, what would be your advice for someone that is finding themselves, their screen time is really, really high and they're trying to get off of it? What is some advice you'd give someone to kind of wean their way off of it and kind of get back to a normal lifestyle?
Yeah, I think the first thing is like they need to find more hobbies that does not involve screen time. So one thing is like, for example, going for walks or running or finding like a sport or whatever it is, like reading books,
Hmm.
finding a musical instrument you want to play, stuff like that. I think is a very good way to kind of get used to doing things without the screen. At least I feel it myself. Like if I have, let's say, jujitsu practice, and I go to jujitsu like by metro. I spend 1.5 hours there. I go back. That's like 3 hours without being on the phone at all. And that's really helpful to kind of get less, let's say, reliant on the constant dopamine spikes. So I think like having hobbies like that is very helpful. And also, I think just being more conscious about this stuff in general, like reading a bit, like how does actually the phone affect my brain? How
Hmm.
does it affect dopamine? I think when people realize the damaging effects it has on them, they become more willing to do harder things that would help them spend less time online.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think most people have this issue and they just don't think it is an issue until they see these like scientific articles about the dope, like what you're talking about, dopamine and all this stuff that really truly affects your everyday life and your motivation and your success. I think people feel like they're in a rut lots of the time, but they don't think the social media and the screen time is part of that rut that they're in or helping to decline their quality of life at all.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I also think, yeah, notifications is a big part of it. Like if you get I know some people they have notifications on everything. Like they have Instagram, they have Snapchat, they have notifications on stuff they don't even need, like a useless app and shit. So
Oh,
and
that's true.
every time you get a notification, your brain releases a bit of dopamine, like, okay, what was that? And you feel kind of the urge to check. So I think a big part of being more like unlike spending less time on the phone, is
Hmm.
turning off everything except what is essential of notifications.
Yeah. I think I was that way for a couple of years ago. Every single time I got an email, I had to reply right away. Even if it's like a Saturday night at 11 o'clock, I have to reply right away. It's something I don't know, but I got rid of that. And I only do it during like the work day or when I actually have time to answer it. I'm fine with not having those. I think as soon as you see that notification number in like the right-hand corner of your app, you have to check it. It's just like an urge for you, but I don't care anymore. And it's something you just kind of have to work towards.
Yeah, yeah, that's very freeing when you're like you don't care. That's a good spot to be in.
Absolutely. Well, Howard, I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. I want to end with where people could buy your books and then the titles of your books and then where people could follow you on social media.
Yeah, so I kind of try to not have a big social media presence
Okay.
because it would be against what I'm trying to do.
It's true.
Uh, but I have a website, so people can find me at havardmela.com. It's
Okay.
HAVARD mela.com. There you can find info about the books and all that. Yeah, the first book is called How to Thrive in the 21st Century. And the second one is Digital Discipline. But I do have a Twitter account because I think Twitter can be set up in a way where you don't get so easily sidetracked.
Mm.
So I spend like a few minutes a day on Twitter, reading good content, stuff like that. So my Twitter account is Håvard Melå.
Awesome. And I'll have all these links in the description. I'll get them from Howard and so everybody could easily access it. But thank you again so much for hopping on the podcast on your weekend and can't wait to get this one out.
Thank you, man. It's my pleasure.